Welcome to another edition of Mailbag. And right up front, if you're sitting there thinking, I watched that video the other day, the reason is because I'm recording one block header for all the Mailbag items I'm going to be filming this afternoon. I was filming outside in the workshop, but it's got too cold, so I've moved inside to the orange corner. So here we go. Now remember, Mailbag are questions, comments, and various other things that you guys leave on the channel or you email me directly that I think are worth airing. So before we get going, parish notices. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, why not? Tell your friends, tell the street, tell the world, get them to subscribe. I jest. But if you seriously haven't subscribed to the channel and you like videos about this sort of stuff and musical equipment in general, then subscribe. If you want to be notified when those sort of videos hit the channel, you really need to press that bell icon as well. If you like the content of the video, give it a thumbs up. Down below, leave comments. I do read the comments, I respond to the comments, and sometimes I even make videos about the comments you guys leave, so they give me ideas about future content for the channel. For less than the price of a cup of coffee, you can support the channel and support the production of videos. The address of the TMTG community is down the bottom there, as are the Facebook and Instagram feeds, where all the channel notices during the week are posted. And obviously the release of videos is posted over there as well. But now, back to the next mailbag item. You catch me marking my script up. Next one comes from long-term commentator Sean Curran in response to the back of the TR8 and the back of the TR8s, a video I did in December 2020. Sean writes, great explanation, John. Didn't know the TR8s could do trigger outs. So if you remember, if you looked on the back of the TR8, it actually had the ability to do trigger outs. Why would you need? Why would you want that? Manual says target device needs to be trigger input like a drum module. However, most modern drum modules have MIDI in, so I'm not sure this is the best route. Maybe use the TR8s to trigger old Simmons, Tampa, or Pearl analog drum modules. And that's kind of the way they used to work, is used to have a signal come in from the drum pad. They didn't really have sort of what we have now on a Roland TD kit, which is sort of this feel, you know, the velocity sensitive and all the other stuff that goes with it. However, I'd be grateful, since clearly the manual says trigger, not CV gate. So I'm not sure if you could still trigger one of these fancy Eurorack bass modules or monosynth. It's a good question, isn't it? It's a very good question, and I had to sit back and think about how I might use this function if I had the drum machine, which I don't. And I pretty much came up with two scenarios of how I might use this. In my industry, we call them use cases, but that's kind of how I responded. So first, trigger an old drum module like a Simmons, where the trigger cable is plugged into the pad socket and therefore would trigger a specific part of the kit, e.g. the bass drums or the toms or the snare. So that's the first way I might use this. The second would be some type of tie-up with a modular system where the trigger triggers a pulse to be generated. And Sean's pretty much identified those two use cases in his query or his question. The thing is, would you use the beat trigger of an old drum machine, as these need a clock source? Although you could do some funky time signatures using the instrument trigger instead. So if you think about it, if you've got an old drum machine, you can actually run an old drum machine effectively at a quarter of the time signature of the piece you're writing by having it trigger once every cycle, for argument's sake. Or you could have it trigger twice every cycle. Does that make sense? So, you know, on the first and third beat, you could have your drum machine trigger and set to those beats, and at that point it would run at half the speed of your other implementation. I can see that being quite fun. Next one comes from Keith Chambers, and it's in response to Roland Struck Gold Again video I did on the JV series. And Keith writes, the JV1080 has been used on more recorders than any other module in the history. It's a solid, it's rock solid construction. They are actually built like tanks. I agree with you on that. And the durability has allowed the JV1080 to be still widely used to this date. Typically, they sold on eBay for around $150 to $300, making a very affordable choice for beginners and musicians with not a lot of money to work with. I believe it deserves a mention. This is a quote from Wikipedia Tech Heads. Yes, the JV series or the JV rack mount modules were incredibly well sold. And the funniest thing really is that you probably see more 580s. So they did the two lower range models, which was the 1080 and the 2080, and I've got a 2080 in my rack. But the feedback I've always had is they flew out the door. The 580 not so, but definitely the two lower models, yeah. And you could do various things with them. You had the hardware cards that you could put in that gave you the expansion features. And what you found quite often was a lot of studios would buy multiple 1080 modules and then fully load them up with all the various cards and sounds that you could get for that particular unit. And because they did that, they then had access to hundreds, maybe thousands of partials and sounds that could be used in recording sessions. So they did really fly out the door. And as you rightly say, what producers and composers would do is they would buy these things and they would put them in racks. And if you think about, a keyboard takes up a finite amount of space, whereas a rack can go underneath a desk. So you can get a lot of sound production in a very small space. Now, for composers and producers who typically will be working in their home environment or in a studio they've constructed, being able to get lots of sound into a small space was quite important, and that's where they came from. Now, I actually bought my 280 because they're, again, for the simple reason, not a lot of dollars, as you rightly say. You got more expansion slots with the 280 than you did with the 1080. I think the 1080 has 2, and I think the 280 has 6. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's a long time since I've been in them. And if you carry on that lineage through to the 580, which didn't sell as well as far as I'm aware, but then became effectively the Integra, when you pretty much on the Integra got all those sounds built in. And no, I don't own an Integra.